Okay, great. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all who are watching me on YouTube, wherever you're watching me from. I'm really glad you joined us. I'm really glad you all joined us. If you haven't noticed it, when you walk into the main room there, we have this new museum display case that's been a long time coming. I'm very proud of it. Spent about 7 or 8 hours putting it together on Friday and Saturday. And in it is a Criswell, A Course in Miracles. So if you don't know what a Criswell is, it's the very first A Course in Miracles book that was printed and bound and published. And there were only 100 of them, and if you look at it, you see that it's not really bound or printed very professionally. It's actually a Xerox that's reduced in size and then glued together with sort of like a construction paper around it. But it was a bound and printed copy of A Course in Miracles, and there were only 100 of them. And one of those books was given to John Mundy. And I have been lobbying John Mundy to let us have that book for several years, because he told me he had it. And as soon as I found out that he had it, I said, well, what are you doing? He said, well, it's in a safe deposit box. I said, it's in a safe deposit box? That book needs to be out where somebody can see it. And it was a little bit of a challenge for him to let go of that book. But he decided he'd make the most of it, so at his workshop at the A Present Love conference that we had in New York City last April, he gave it to me in a public manner, and I went up and got it and cried. I was so moved that he finally gave that to us and that we would have that. And I told him that we would put it on display very nicely and that we would mention him in a plaque or something that we would have there. So please go look at it if you didn't look at it on your way in, and read the plaque. And I invite all of you on YouTube to click over here, and you will see a little video of the Criswell in the museum case, and I will read what's on the plaque to you. So, right here. Click. And watch the video of the Criswell. There's only a couple of them left in existence. Okay, the title for the talk today is Going Against the Sickness and Death Lobby. So, I believe that there is a very powerful lobby in our culture, and it's a lobby that's convincing us that we're going to get sick and that we're going to die, and that it's kind of the inevitable lot of human existence. And even though A Course in Miracles has some very powerful statements against this, like, swear not to die, you holy Son of God, you make a bargain that you cannot keep, the Son of Life cannot be killed, he is immortal as his Father, what he is cannot be changed. And so even there's these very strong statements like this one, people still believe that they will be going through some kind of death experience, because that's just what happens when you are a physical person, when you believe you are a physical person. And I get from A Course in Miracles that we're supposed to let go of this belief, that we don't have to go through a death experience, at least not the way that it's normally played out here in our experience of life. But there is this very, very strong, pervasive thought system, group of people, of society, that are continually reinforcing this idea, and they're hard to fight. They're hard to fight, and they're fully funded. The dictionary defines lobby as a group of people seeking to influence politicians or public officials on a particular issue. And so, of course, we have things like the gun lobby that's always making sure that we don't have legislation that gets passed that limits guns in some kind of way, because we all need to be armed to the hilt. We have pharmaceutical lobbies or drug lobbies that make sure that certain medications and drugs get passed and through, and get the prices don't get regulated the way that other things maybe would get regulated, and that the pharmaceutical companies have all this right to set whatever price they want on the medications that the other lobby is telling us that we need. We have lobbyists for the banks and for the financial institutions. They influence our financial policy or our lack of financial policy. Banking regulations, they influenced former leaders to let go of a lot of banking regulations. Inevitably, that's why we had the big real estate bubble in 2008 that caused a very major recession, some say depression. If you haven't gone to see it, go see The Big Short. It's a great movie. It's nominated for Academy Award for Best Picture. It's all about that particular bubble. But there are progressive lobbies as well. It's not just a conservative thing. There's an environmental lobby lobbying politicians to pass environmental legislation to protect our resources. There's things like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers that lobby Congress to make sure that there's laws and penalties and regulations that help regulate drinking and driving so that people don't get killed. And you know, these things have huge effects on our culture. The gun culture in our country specifically, you know, the United States, and what happens because we have this lobby continually telling us that we have the right or maybe the need to bear arms. Go see the 2002 film by Michael Moore called Bowling for Columbine, and you will see a lot of that and how it plays out. It's great. You know, I had the idea for this talk, this sermon, this teaching, whatever you want to call it is fine with us, when I was watching MSNBC the other day. And I had this growing realization, but it finally hit me how just about in every commercial break, there's 2 or 3 commercials that are telling us how to get sick, that we're going to get sick, that we're going to die, and these are the medications that you need. A lot of them are financed by the drug companies. And so the other day I just watched an hour of MSNBC, and I just jotted down what commercials they had. So there was one for against diabetes, and there was a new medication called Victoza that you could take for diabetes. Of course, bladder problems, they're very common, and they were advertising some sort of adult diaper named Always. Quitting smoking is now a disease. I didn't know that. There's a medication against quitting smoking called Chantix. There's probably several others. Heart attack, ooh, very devastating commercial about people clutching their heart and drop. They even show you how to do it. Isn't it great? They not only are talking about it, they show you how to have a heart attack and what goes on with your heart. Wonderful. That was actually Bayer Aspirin who was promoting that one. Heartburn, something, you know, that just about everybody has, right? That was Alka-Seltzer. COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, very bad, had terrible pictures. That was the Symbicort inhaler that was promoting that one. PNEU, especially if you're over 50, which is pneumococcal pneumonia, very devastating. There was a big ad about that. You know, it didn't seem to be promoted by any drug company, so my guess is there's some drug company that has a monopoly on the drugs that you might take for that, so they don't have to tell you what medication to take. They'll just show you the disease, and so you can get it, go to a doctor, and take their medication, I assume. Just aging in general, take 1 a day multiple vitamins, 65 plus, for you're over 65. I got 2 years to wait, and then I can take that. Asthma, there was a Brio inhaler. This was all in 1 hour of MSNBC. Joint pain, Humira. Alzheimer's disease, Namenda, oh, and that's always devastating. They show you there's really no cure for Alzheimer's, and it's always kind of pathetic with some older person and some child, but now they're taking Namenda, and you know, they have a little more cognitive ability, so it's so much wonderful, but they make sure that you know that it's not going to cure it. Just plain colds, Alka-Seltzer Plus. Oh, my favorite, the erectile dysfunction ads. I love those ads for so many reasons. They were advertising Cialis for daily use. Yeah. You know, I think it's amusing that they've labeled erectile, the ability not to get erect, as a disease. I always thought it was a function of having the same partner, so you needed to find a new one. Or maybe you were just masturbating too much, and you had to cut it down just a little bit. At least the day or 2 before you were planning. That was always my strategy. And we're funding these lobbies. We're funding them ourselves by this tremendous amount of money that we pay for all of these things. We just give them money. You know how much money they make on Viagra? It's amazing. So, and then there were just other things. There was like, you know, write a will so that you don't pass without, you know, having all that stuff straight. There were law firms that advertised for making sure that you had a law firm to represent you in case you had a debilitating accident. Of course, there's the regular life insurance companies that advertise for life insurance policies, and they're always very scary and pathetic. Some father thinking about his children, who would take care of them? So again, ensuring that you get the message that you're going to die. You could die anytime, not planned, could die tomorrow. A meteor could hit us any moment. We could all be wiped out. Maybe an earthquake could happen any moment. Need life insurance. And one of my favorites now is reverse mortgages. They're advertising for reverse mortgages all the time. And this is great. This is always an older couple. And you know that you could have your house pay you money and still live in it and still own it. And they never really, clarify that basically you're selling the banks your home little by little in very small monthly pieces. And eventually you won't own that home anymore because the bank will own it. And these are just some of the things that you see. This is what the lobby does. This is what the conversation does. It bombards us with this all the time. It's so all pervasive. And I love watching politics on MSNBC. And I think about it, though, that it is funded very primarily by the sickness and death lobby. And is that really what I want to promote? Course in Miracles has so much to say about this. It says, sickness takes many forms, and so does unforgiveness. The form of one, but reproduces the form of the other. For they are the same illusion. So closely is one translated into the other, that a careful study of the form a sickness takes will point quite clearly to the form of unforgiveness that it represents. This is an amazing statement, that if you actually look at the issue and the problem, the sickness that we're manifesting, and you're open-minded about it, maybe ask for a little guidance about it, you will get clear about what misthought you're having and what you really need to forgive. Louise Hay got famous for doing just that many, many years ago. So, think about it. We just kind of gloss over this and think that maybe as a Course in Miracles student we just shouldn't pay attention to any of these things when they happen to us, but actually we should use them as a feedback mechanism because it's telling us where our forgiveness issues lie. I remember when Reverend Larry got cancer. He had cancer 3 times. He made his transition because of one form of cancer, because of pancreatic cancer, but he had had prostate cancer some years before that, and he had had lymphoma some years before that. And I have heard that people who get cancer, it's because of a raging anger against the world for not getting your just due in some way. You just didn't get what you deserve to get, and it's that anger. Now, I don't know if that was true for Reverend Larry, but those are interesting things to think about, and I know that Reverend Larry never thought about any of those things. I have heard that HIV infection or AIDS is an internalized belief that we have no right to be here. That you have no right to be here in some way, and so your own immune system attacks you because you just don't deserve to be here. I've heard that. I've heard that back and spine problems are because you don't really feel like your world can support you. You don't really feel like you deserve the support of your world, and so you manifest that. I have heard that eye disease is because you're afraid to look at something. You don't know what you want to look at, and you're afraid to see it, you're afraid to look at something, you manifest eye disease. I have heard that mental health issues, my own issue, is that you're just afraid that your mind and your intelligence is going to fail you. I think that's really what's true for me when I manifest those things. It's a manifestation of my fear that my intelligence, which was always a thing I prided myself on and which got me through so many things. I wasn't talented in many ways, but I was smart and I could figure things out. But it's that fear that I'm going to lose that thing that I've relied on to be better than others or different than others. And if I'm afraid I'm going to lose that, I manifest something that causes me to lose it. So, do we really look at our health issues when they come up and think about what is it that I need to get through, that I need to forgive, that I need to learn? Because they actually could teach us so much. And yet we tend to pretend that they're not even there. Larry's 3 cancers, that was an interesting thing, I thought, because the first 2 sort of trained him to accept cancers. Now, he got over them, but it sort of trained him just to buy into the medical establishment. The medical establishment was going to help him. Well, it helped him in the first 2 times. And so then when the 3rd cancer came, he just totally relied on the medical institutions. Reverend Larry never opened up in A Course in Miracles book from the day he got the pancreatic cancer diagnosis until he made his transition. He got the cancer diagnosis, never opened that book again. Why? You know, that's when he would have needed it the most. Even if it wouldn't have prevented his transition, his whole process leading up to the transition may have been a whole lot better than it was. It was sort of devastating and awful. So, you know, sometimes we can protect our body, but it's limited and it's temporary. And then another sickness manifests. And the Course talks about this. It says, ask yourself this: can you protect the mind? The body, yes, a little, not from time, but temporarily. So we can do little things that help heal the body, but it's temporary. And unless we've really done the mental work, we'll just manifest another thing. So, yeah, go ahead and do your doctors and your medication, but do your mental work at the same time, because otherwise it's just going to manifest again, maybe in another form. And I really see that that's what happened with Reverend Larry. At least that's how I observed it. And I also know that Reverend Larry needed to go because he was so attached to that home that he lived in, that mansion. And he had done sort of a private reverse mortgage situation. He kept drawing money out of his equity of his home. He kept taking bigger and bigger loans on his home. And pretty soon he wasn't going to be able to pay the mortgage payments. He was going to have to move out of that home. And those of you who know him know how attached he was to that home he lived in. And he made his transition right during that process where he would have had to have moved. In fact, he actually lived there kind of illegally for a little bit of time towards the end of his life. So, you know, he had to go because he couldn't really grapple with letting all that go. You know, I saw that. A lot of people who were around him saw that. So our processes, our illness and death processes are teaching us something, but we do have to be open to learning it. So be very careful with things like reverse mortgages, because you're telling the banks and the financial institutions how many more years you think you got left. What happens if you live longer than that? And why would you box your existence into something that a financial institution said? You know, there's a lot of people who channel Jesus. I know it's very popular right now to think of John Mark Hammer and The Way of Mastery, and to think of the A Course of Love book and Maury Perrin. But you know, people have been channeling Jesus for a really, really long time. And one of my favorite channelers of Jesus is actually Paul Tuttle. And he's been channeling Jesus for a long time, and he channels Jesus through an entity called Raj. He hears Raj's voice, and Raj has identified himself as Jesus. And this is a channeling, I really loved it, from Raj. It's a fairly recent one. This is from November 5th, 2011. So this is Raj, or Jesus, talking through Paul Tuttle. You are sick, you sin, you die, not because you're in a material world or in the middle of an illusion, but because you are lazy in your use of your mind, and you are accepting things that aren't true without challenging them. And I am here to say, you know, get a little guts. Challenge these things, contradict them. Not as though you're contradicting anything real, but as a means of tuning your mind. You know, I love that. Challenge, get a little guts when these things happen. You know, do the medical things that you feel you need to do, but do your mental work at the same time. Get a little guts. Challenge them. It's sort of like, I'll say a sexist thing. It's like, get a little balls. Get some balls. Grow a pair when these things happen. Get some courage to really work your spiritual program intensely when these things come up. Raj showed up to Paul Tuttle. I feel I should give him his due here. On February 7th, 1982, that's 34 years ago, by the way, 1 year after Helen Schuckman's passing. Raj first just was Raj to Paul. And about a year later, somebody handed Paul an A Course in Miracles book, and Paul was reading the A Course in Miracles book and kind of saw that it looked like it was channeled from Jesus. And so Paul was confused about that, so he asked Raj, the entity that was speaking in his mind, he asked, Am I to understand this is from Jesus? Who wrote this? And Raj responded, I did. And that's when Paul Tuttle realized that Raj was Jesus. And they had a lot of conversations about that. And people followed Raj channelings. Course in Miracles students followed Raj channelings for many, many years. Always a little controversial in a Course in Miracles circles. You know, the fundamentalists didn't want to think of anybody else channeling Jesus except Helen Schuckman. It's the same thing that goes on today. This is why, you know, people get all excited about these new channelers. Like, this is old news. This is to me. But it's great. I like, and I've, you know, read a number of Raj things. I'm not a big student of his, but, you know, I liked a lot of what I've read. And in 2002, Raj began to actually teach from the text of A Course in Miracles. He now uses the Sparkly edition, which is very similar to the original edition, the one that we use. And he said some things about why he prefers that edition, and they're similar to my thoughts about things like that. Anyway, Raj, check him out. Check out Paul Tuttle. Got a ton of teachings on their website, and you can log in and you can get a part of their email group and get things from them. Okay, going against the sickness and death lobby. It's a strong lobby. It's very hard to go against it. But we can use the medications and the doctors that we feel guided to use. I think A Course in Miracles says that. I want to make sure that that's clear and that I'm not calling people not to use those things. It says, it does not follow, this is the Course, however, that the use of these very weak corrective devices, those are material means like medications, is evil. Sometimes the illness has a sufficiently great hold over the mind to render a person inaccessible to atonement. In this case, it is wise to utilize a compromise approach to mind and body, in which something from the outside is temporarily given healing belief. So it's actually wise to do that. It's wise to seek out these material means and or while we are doing the mental, internal, spiritual mind healing work. Not in substitute for it, but in conjunction with it, in partnership with it. In another place, this is the teacher's manual that says, special agents, these material means, seem to be ministering to him, yet they but give form to his own choice. He chooses them to bring tangible form to his desires, and it is this they do and nothing else. So if a special agent seems to be helping us, make sure that we understand that that's not actually healing us. What's healing us is our mind has decided to heal, and we're bringing in some agent that we can work with. But it's always the mind that is doing the healing. Going up against this lobby, the sickness and death lobby, like I said, takes continual work because they are continually bombarding us. And we are funding them to bombard us, so it's strong. And I believe that's why continual study and engagement with spiritual healing disciplines like A Course in Miracles is so very, very important, because it gives us the strength to go up against that lobby. I think that's why participation with the Community Miracle Center is so very important, because we're a group that is studying spiritual healing and we're working on it. I think coming to Sunday service is very important because we get these thoughts reinforced, and we need that foundation of those thoughts when something comes up and challenges us. You know, we are here. We have been here since 1987. That's 29 years. Next year we'll have a 30-year anniversary. You know, I want to relate it to John Mundy giving us the Criswell, and why that means so much to me. Because we've been here a long time, and we have a large group of ministers that we've trained. And we are working constantly to move this as an organization with such a good foundation that it goes on in perpetuity. It's not about me, it's not about Larry, it's not about the particular group of ministers that we have here now, but it's about us evolving a process where we ordain people to become ministers and create a system that allows us to go through into the future for an indefinite amount of time, maybe many years, maybe many decades, maybe many centuries, in perpetuity. Certainly way past I'm being involved. And that's why having things like that Criswell is so important, because it gives that sense of history, but to me it's here so people can see it, and so people can see it for generations to come. And I really believe that that's why John Mundy gave it to us. He gave it to us because He had no particular use for it, need for it, and he wants it to be in a place that people are going to be able to see it for years, for decades, and maybe even centuries to come. And that's why it means so very much to me. So if you go out there and look at the Criswell, I know the temptation is to think of it as the past. But when I look at it, what I see is the future, and the future of the CMC in perpetuity. Thank you. That's my share.